I used to think the scariest things in life were student debt and unemployment. 3 months of living on ramen noodles and dodging my landlord's calls had taught me the special kind of desperation that comes with watching your bank account drain like a sieve. What I didn't know then was that desperation has levels, and I hadn't even scratched the surface of what that word really means. The email arrived at 3:17 a.m. during another sleepless night of job hunting. My laptop screen cast a pale blue glow across my studio apartment as I scrolled through endless listings demanding 5+ years experience for entry-level positions. That's when I saw it. Immediate opening, Everglades boat tour guide. $95 per hour plus housing included. No prior experience required. Start tomorrow. Contact for details. I must have read it 20 times, searching for the catch. Jobs like this don't just appear, especially not when your bank account is hovering at $47.23 and your environmental science degree seems about as useful as a paper umbrella in a hurricane. But when you're 24 and the only thing in your fridge is half a bottle of ketchup and a questionable yogurt, you learn to silence that voice of reason. I sent my application at 3:22 a.m. The response came at 3:23 a.m. Position is yours. Bus ticket attached. Arrive tomorrow at Okeechobee Station. Someone will meet you. Looking back, I should have wondered why they responded so quickly, why they didn't ask for references or even a phone interview. But desperation has a way of making red flags look like welcome banners. The Greyhound ride to Florida was 18 hours of crying babies, mysterious smells, and a steady descent into what felt like the world's largest sauna. I watched through foggy windows as civilized Florida gave way to something older, wilder. Strip malls became swamps. Highway signs became less frequent. The air grew thick enough to chew. Okeechobee, Florida turned out to be less of a town and more of a suggestion. One gas station with half its letters missing. A diner that looked like it had last seen fresh paint when Kennedy was president. And everywhere, the Everglades, an endless maze of water and green stretching to the horizon like nature's version of an M.C. Escher painting. The bus wheezed to a stop in front of the gas station, and I stepped out into air so humid it felt like breathing through a wet towel. My shirt stuck to my back before I'd taken 3 steps. A palmetto bug the size of my thumb scuttled across my path, and I fought the urge to jump back. Welcome to Florida. The gas station's bell chimed as I pushed open the door, seeking refuge in the blessed air conditioning. Behind the counter, an elderly woman with cotton white hair looked up from her crossword puzzle. Her name tag read, Betty, though the letters were so faded they barely qualified as legible. "You must be the new tour guide," she said, not even a question. Her voice had that distinctive Florida cracker drawl, smooth as honey, but with an edge of something sharper underneath. That obvious, huh? I wiped the sweat from my forehead with my sleeve, already regretting my choice of long-sleeved shirt. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "We don't get many newcomers around here, especially not ones carrying everything they own in a duffel bag." She paused, studying me like I was one of her crossword puzzles. "You're headed to Marty's dock?" I nodded, pulling out my phone to check the directions I'd been sent. "Won't get any signal out here," Betty said, tapping her pen against the counter. 2 miles that way." She pointed east. "Follow the road until you hit water. Can't miss it." She paused again, and something in her expression made me uneasy. "You know anything about the Glades, boy?" "Environmental science major," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Did my thesis on wetland ecosystems. Studied the impact of climate change on..." She made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. Books don't tell you everything. The Glades, they've got their own rules. Best learn them quick. I bought a bottle of water and a pack of beef jerky, more to be polite than hungry. As I turned to leave, she called out, "Hey, college boy, when Marty gives you the rules, follow them, all of them, no matter what." The walk to the dock was like traveling through soup. Even the insects seemed to be moving in slow motion, too heat-stunned to do more than buzz lazily past. By the time I arrived, my clothes were soaked through, and I'd drunk half my water. The dock itself was a weathered wooden structure that looked like it had survived more hurricanes than it should have. Several airboats were tied up, their metal fans gleaming in the harsh Florida sun. The wood creaked under my feet as I walked, and I noticed how some of the planks seemed to have been replaced recently, their color slightly off from their neighbors. Marty turned out to be exactly what you'd expect from someone who'd spent their life in the Everglades. Leather skin, permanent squint, and a cigarette hanging from his lips like it was surgically attached. His gray eyes sized me up as I approached, taking in my city clothes and already wilting appearance. "Ben?" he asked, voice like gravel in a blender. "Yes, sir. Got your email about the job." He grunted, taking a long drag from his cigarette. The smoke curled around his head like a halo in the humid air. "You're early? Good. Means you might actually listen." He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, edges worn soft like old money. The paper looked old, really old, like it had been handled by countless hands before mine. The creases were so deep they'd nearly torn through in places, and water stains marked the corners. But the writing was still clearly visible, written in what looked like fountain pen ink. "These are the rules," he said, holding the paper just out of reach. "Before I give them to you, I need to know you understand something. This isn't some Disney World boat ride. The Glades, they're old. Older than anything you learned about in that fancy college of yours. And they've got rules. Break them, and..." He trailed off, looking out over the water. "And what? Just don't break them." He handed me the paper. The rules were written in careful strokes, though some parts were smudged as if the writer's hand had been shaking. As I read them, I felt that familiar urge to laugh. The same one I got when someone tried to tell me about their ghost stories or UFO sightings. But something in Marty's expression stopped me. Rules of the Everglades boat tour. Rule 1. Do not leave the marked paths on the map, even if the water looks calm. The deep places aren't meant for us, and what lives there doesn't take kindly to visitors. Rule 2. If a passenger asks about the old lost towns or ghost boats, tell them it's just a myth. Don't elaborate. Don't explain. Some stories shouldn't be encouraged. Rule 3. If you spot a man standing on the riverbank with no shadow, turn the boat around immediately. He doesn't belong here, and neither will you if you acknowledge him. Rule 4. At exactly 1:13 p.m., you must stop the boat and let it idle for 1 full minute. Something will pass beneath you. Do not disturb it. Don't look directly at it. Don't speak until it's gone. Rule 5. Do not allow any passenger to bring red flowers on board. If you find one, throw it overboard before the boat leaves the dock. They attract attention we don't want. Rule 6. If the birds fall silent, keep the engine running. Do not stop moving until the birds sing again. What makes them quiet is still listening. Rule 7. At dusk, a woman with wet hair may wave to you from the mangroves. Do not wave back. She's looking for someone, and you don't want it to be you. Rule 8. If you hear splashing behind you but see nothing, Don't turn around. It's just trying to trick you into looking. Keep your eyes forward and pray it loses interest. Rule 9. The tour ends at the same dock it begins. If the dock looks different when you return, you're not done yet. Keep going until you find the right one. This has to be some kind of joke, I said, though my voice sounded less certain than I'd intended. The paper felt oddly heavy in my hands, like it was made of something denser than ordinary paper. Marty lit another cigarette, the flame from his lighter dancing oddly in the humid air. Everything's a joke until it isn't, kid. Come on, I'll show you the boat you'll be using. The airboat was newer than the others, its metal gleaming under the harsh Florida sun. Marty walked me through the controls, throttle, steering, emergency procedures. It all seemed straightforward enough, though I couldn't help noticing how he kept glancing at his watch. First tours tomorrow morning, he said, checking his watch again. 8 a.m. sharp. Small group, better for learning the ropes. He paused, then added, "The housing we promised is that trailer over there." He pointed to a small mobile home set back from the water, partially hidden by palmetto bushes. Previous guide left in a hurry. Everything should still work. Left in a hurry? I asked, but Marty was already walking away, waving over his shoulder. Remember the rules, kid. Every single one of them. The trailer was basic but clean, though there was something off about it. Personal items were still scattered around, a coffee mug in the sink, a jacket thrown over a chair, a book face down on the bedside table. It looked like someone had just stepped out and planned to return any minute. I spent that first night tossing and turning on the squeaky bed, listening to the sounds of the Everglades. The frogs created an endless symphony, punctuated by splashes and rustles that seemed to get closer as the night wore on. I kept the rules sheet on the bedside table, finding myself reading it over and over until the words began to blur. Morning came too quickly, the Florida sun blazing through the thin curtains like nature's alarm clock. I dressed quickly in the clothes Marty had left: khaki shorts, a moisture-wicking polo with the tour company's logo, and a wide-brimmed hat. Professional, but practical. My first tour group arrived right on schedule. Bob and Linda Matthews from Ohio, celebrating their 35th wedding anniversary, and Mike Chen, a photography student from UCLA working on his thesis about wetland wildlife. They seemed normal enough. Bob in his cargo shorts and fishing vest, Linda clutching her bird-watching guide, and Mike barely visible behind his camera equipment. "Welcome to the Everglades," I began, channeling every nature documentary I'd ever watched. "Before we begin, I need to go over some safety guidelines." The first hour was perfect. I pointed out birds, explained the ecosystem, talked about conservation efforts. Bob and Linda were the ideal tourists, gasping with delight at every bird sighting and asking thoughtful questions about the mangroves. Mike barely spoke, too busy with his cameras, though I noticed he kept framing shots of empty water, as if expecting something to appear. Then it happened. The birds went silent. It wasn't a gradual thing. One moment the air was filled with calls and songs, the next, nothing. Just the low hum of the boat's engine and the splash of water against the hull. The silence felt physical, like a weight pressing down on us. Rule number 6 flashed through my mind. If the birds fall silent, keep the engine running. Do not stop moving until the birds sing again. What makes them quiet is still listening. My hands tightened on the controls until my knuckles went white. I kept the boat moving, trying to act natural as I scanned the water. That's when I heard it. a soft splash behind us, like something large breaking the surface. "What was that?" Linda asked, turning to look. Her face had gone pale beneath her sun hat. "Probably just a gator," I said quickly, remembering rule number 8. They love to follow boats. Best not to look. Wouldn't want to encourage them. The splashing continued, growing closer. Mike raised his camera, but I stopped him. "Fish are camera shy," I lied. "You'll get better shots up ahead." For 5 agonizing minutes, we moved through the water with that thing following us. I kept my eyes forward. Even when the splashing got so close, it sounded like it was right beside the boat. The water rippled in ways that didn't make sense, creating patterns that seemed to form and dissolve before you could quite focus on them. Finally, a single bird called out, then another, and soon the air was filled with the normal swamp sounds again. I checked my watch, 1:10 p.m. 3 minutes until rule number 4 kicked in. We were in a narrow channel now, mangroves creating a natural tunnel overhead. Their roots twisted into the dark water like gnarled fingers. At exactly 1:13, I cut the engine, my heart pounding so hard I was sure the others could hear it. Taking a quick break, I announced, proud of how steady my voice sounded. Perfect time for photos. "Oh, Bob, look at that bird over there." Linda pointed at a snowy egret perched on a branch, but I barely heard her. The water had gone unnaturally still, like glass. That's when I saw it. The shadow appeared slowly at first, just a darker patch in the already murky water. But as it moved beneath us, I realized how massive it was. It moved like a snake, but was far too large, with shapes that suggested limbs, or maybe tentacles. The shadow passed directly under the boat, and I swear I felt something brush against the hull, a light scratching that sent shivers up my spine. Bob leaned over, squinting at the water. "Did you see that?" "Looked like a big fish or something." "Manatee, probably," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "They're common in these parts, but we both knew it wasn't a manatee. Manatees don't move like that. Manatees don't make the water feel colder just by passing through it." The minute felt like an hour, but finally, I restarted the engine. As we moved on, I noticed Mike checking his camera with a frown. Later, he told me none of his photos from that exact minute came out, just black frames where images should have been. The tour continued, and I started to relax slightly. We saw alligators sunning themselves on logs, herons stalking through the shallows, and even a shy manatee, a real one this time. The Matthews were thrilled, taking pictures of everything and sharing stories about their grandkids back in Ohio. Then Linda asked the question I'd been dreading. "Is it true what they say about the lost towns?" she asked, flipping through her guidebook. "I read something about whole communities that disappeared out here." Rule number 2 kicked in immediately. If a passenger asks about the old lost towns or ghost boats, tell them it's just a myth. Don't elaborate, don't explain. Some stories shouldn't be encouraged. Just local legends, I said, quickly. Perhaps too quickly. You know how these old places are. People love their ghost stories. But Linda wasn't done. But I read that in 1973, an entire... "Look," I interrupted, pointing at a completely ordinary osprey. "That's a rare sight this time of year." The distraction worked, but as I steered us away from that topic, I noticed something on the riverbank. A man standing perfectly still among the sawgrass. He was wearing what looked like an old-fashioned suit, complete with a fedora, but something about him seemed wrong. It took me a moment to realize what it was. The bright Florida sun was directly overhead, but he cast no shadow. Rule number 3 echoed in my mind. If you spot a man standing on the riverbank with no shadow, turn the boat around immediately. He doesn't belong here, and neither will you if you acknowledge him. I spun the wheel hard, making a sharp turn that sent water spraying. "Everything okay?" Mike asked, steadying his camera equipment. "Just took a wrong turn," I said, forcing a laugh. These channels all look the same sometimes. As we turned, I caught one last glimpse of the man. He had turned to follow our movement, and although I couldn't make out his face under the fedora, I could have sworn he was smiling. The sun was starting to set as we made our final loop back toward the dock. The light had turned golden, casting long shadows across the water. Natural shadows, I kept reminding myself. That's when Mike spotted her. "Hey, look over there," he called out, raising his camera. "There's someone in the water." Rule number 7. At dusk, a woman with wet hair may wave to you from the mangroves. Do not wave back. She's looking for someone, and you don't want it to be you. She stood half submerged in the dark water, her long black hair clinging to her pale face like seaweed. One arm raised slowly in greeting, a sad smile playing on her lips. Her eyes... I tried not to look at her eyes. "Oh my God," Linda gasped. "Should we help her? She could be stranded." "Just a local," I said, keeping my voice casual while increasing our speed. "Lots of people swim out here." "In the mangroves?" Mike asked skeptically. "With the alligators?" I didn't answer, just kept the boat moving. I could feel her eyes on us until we rounded the bend. Nobody spoke for the rest of the trip. Finally, the dock came into view, exactly as we'd left it. Normal, safe. The word Ochopi still clearly visible on the weathered sign. The same loose board still creaking when you stepped on it. I helped my passengers off, accepted their generous tips. Guilt money, I realized later, for all the times they'd thought I was making mistakes when I was actually following the rules, and watched them walk back toward their cars. Marty materialized beside me like a ghost, lighting another cigarette with hands that never seemed to shake. "You followed the rules," he said. It wasn't a question. Did I have a choice? "There's always a choice, kid." He exhaled a cloud of smoke that hung unnaturally still in the humid air. "You just made the right ones today. The trailer felt too small, too vulnerable." I opened my laptop, thinking I could research the history of Ochopi and the Everglades, maybe find some rational explanation for what I'd seen. The internet was painfully slow, but I managed to find plenty about the ecosystem, the wildlife, the conservation efforts, but nothing about shadowless men in fedoras, nothing about women in mangroves, nothing about things that made birds fall silent. Around midnight, someone knocked on my trailer door. 3 sharp raps that seemed to echo in the quiet night. I froze, remembering how the previous guide had left in a hurry. "Hello?" I called out, not moving from my chair. No answer. Just another 3 knocks, slightly louder this time. I thought about the rules. Nothing specific about knocking, but something told me opening that door would be a very bad idea. I stayed perfectly still, barely breathing, until I heard footsteps moving away. They sounded wet, like someone had just climbed out of the water. The next morning, there were damp footprints leading from the water to my door and back again. They weren't human footprints. They weren't animal prints either. At least, not any animal I'd studied in my environmental science classes. Marty was already at the dock when I arrived, looking like he hadn't moved since yesterday. "Rough night?" he asked, though his tone suggested he knew exactly what kind of night I'd had. "The previous guide?" I said, choosing my words carefully. "What happened to them?" Marty lit a fresh cigarette. the flame from his lighter dancing oddly in the morning light. "Broke rule number 9, he said finally. Got impatient. Saw what looked like our dock and decided close enough was good enough." He shrugged. "Haven't seen them since." "And before them?" "Rule number 3. Waved at the man with no shadow. Thought it was just some tourist taking pictures." I swallowed hard. "And before that one?" Marty gave me a long look. "You really want to know?" I didn't, but I asked anyway. Rule number 7. Got sympathetic. Tried to help the woman in the mangroves. She'd been watching that guide for weeks, waving every sunset. One day they waved back. He flicked ash from his cigarette. The thing about the woman in the mangroves, she's patient. She'll wait until you forget to be afraid, until you start thinking maybe the rules are just superstition, until you wave back. A family of 4 was walking down the dock, today's first tour. They looked painfully normal in their matching Disney World t-shirts and new sun hats. "Ready for another tour?" Marty asked, but his eyes said something else. They said, "Ready to follow the rules again? Ready to keep these people safe from things they don't even know exist?" I thought about the shadow under the boat, the woman in the mangroves, the splashing that followed us. I thought about my empty bank account and my student loans. I thought about the wet footprints outside my door. "Yeah," I said. "I'm ready." And I was. Because out here in the Glades, the rules aren't just guidelines. They're the only thing standing between us and whatever waits in the deep water, whatever waves from the mangroves, whatever walks without a shadow. The family approached, the kids already arguing about who would sit where. The father was checking his phone. No signal out here, I could have told him. And the mother was dutifully applying sunscreen to everyone. I put on my tour guide smile and stepped forward to greet them. "Welcome to the Everglades," I said, the rules burning in my back pocket like a brand. "Before we begin, I need to go over some safety guidelines." The rules are still there, folded in my wallet. Sometimes, late at night, I take them out and read them again, reminding myself that they're real, that everything I saw was real. The paper feels older every time I touch it, but the ink never fades. And if you're ever in Ochapee, and you see a job listing for a boat tour guide that seems too good to be true, well, you know the rules now. Whether you follow them or not, that's your choice to make. Just remember, the Glades are watching, and they're very, very patient.